This is a follow-up to the What the Bible Really Says About Being Gay video previously posted on this channel. If you haven't watched that yet, then you can check it out here. This could be a difficult topic to understand from a biblical perspective. So to help with that, we're going to create a homosexuality checklist. To do this, we need to define homosexuality. So for the purposes of this video, we're going to define homosexuality as a consensual, romantic, or sexual attraction between two people of the same gender. So now we can make our checklist. Being gay in our culture today is a consensual, romantic, or sexual attraction between two people of the same gender. Okay, so we have our checklist. Let's go ahead and get started. There are 6 verses in the Bible that people generally reference when talking about homosexuality. So let's run these through our checklist. Genesis chapter 18, quick recap. 2 travelers come to the town of Sodom. The people were extremely sinful and attempt to rape the travelers. Alright, so the travelers were men, and so were the mob of Sodomites. Same gender? Check. From there, it pretty much goes downhill. It was an angry mob trying to rape a couple of travelers, so between two people, no. And because rape, not consensual, and because it was rape, romance and sexual attraction is out of the picture. So this verse does not get a pass from our homosexuality checklist. Now you have the idea. Let's keep going. Leviticus 18:22 and Leviticus 20:13. Brief recap. This is a section of the Bible giving instructions to the ancient Israelites on how to live and how to conduct their lives in a manner that is pleasing to God. The Israelites were surrounded by different people groups that did things God considered to be detestable, and men having sex with men is on that list. So the big question is, were these surrounding nations practicing consensual, romantic, or sexual attraction between two people of the same gender as we would recognize homosexuality today, or are these verses referring to something else entirely? Let's take a look at some biblical evidence. In 1 Kings 14:22, the Bible describes a nation called the Ammonites. They were a Semitic people closely related to the Israelites. However, despite their common ancestry, they didn't follow God and instead practiced a type of ritual prostitution. The Bible notes that as part of their religion, the men in the land sold the use of their bodies. This is very different than romantic or sexual relationships that we would think of with homosexuality today. That would also explain why these verses reference men having sex with men and don't mention women. So if we look at our checklist, they get more checks than the last verse, but romantic or sexual attraction gets an X. These verses fail our homosexuality checklist because religious prostitution and modern homosexuality are two very different things. So now we come to 1 Corinthians 6:9-10 and 1 Timothy 1:9-10. These two verses are found in the New Testament and use the same Hebrew word to describe the same thing. The true meaning of this word is difficult to determine because it's only used twice in the entire Bible, and in both cases we don't get a good context for understanding it. When we look at other writings from that time period, we see the word is used to describe a type of sexual exploitation between a person who has power and a person who doesn't. It could be referring to a male slave or servant used for sex, or perhaps a type of male prostitute. It's not entirely clear, but what is clear is that one person in this equation has power over the other. So looking at our checklist, we have same gender check, between two people check, but consensual, no. If someone has power over you, then you really can't consent. That's why today we have things like statutory laws punishing adults for having relationships with minors, or rules about prison guards having relationships with inmates. Because just because someone goes along with an act doesn't mean they consent to it. These verses fail our homosexuality checklist. Now let's look at Romans 1:26-27. This verse describes both men and women who shamefully lust after one another, and we're given the context for this right in the previous verse. We're told that this is an act that is part of pagan worship. Paul, the author of this passage, was writing specifically to Jewish Christ followers living in Rome at the time. In our Leviticus verses, God didn't want the Israelites in the Old Testament to be influenced by the people around them. Similarly, Paul didn't want Christ followers in the New Testament to be influenced by the Roman cultural practices at the time. These practices included lavish parties, orgies, and sexual promiscuity, all in honor of pagan gods. So if we look at our checklist, we have same gender, really both genders, but we'll give it a check. Between two people, not always. Consensual, yes. Romantic or sexual attraction, no, because these acts were tied to idolatry and pagan worship. So this verse fails our homosexuality checklist. When you look at these verses in context, you can see that they are not talking about homosexuality as we know it today and are talking about something else entirely. Thanks for watching. If this video made an impact on you and you'd like to see more on this channel, you can help support us by buying something from our online store. Check out some fancy wall art in the link below. You can also support us on Patreon.